and admitting people.
All right, good evening, everyone joining us for this evening's workshop. We're going to give folks just a few more minutes to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for hopping on. All right, good evening, folks joining us for this evening's workshop. We're going to give everybody just about 1 more minute, and then we'll get started. Looks like we still just got a few people hopping on, so we'll give it just about 30 more seconds, and then we'll jump right in. Thanks, everyone. All right, well, it is 7:01, so officially good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for a workshop on the City of Pinole's Communication and Engagement Plan. My name is Jen Nentwig. I'm a principal with the marketing and public affairs firm Tripepi Smith, and I'm your facilitator here tonight. And I'm also part of the team that developed the communication and engagement plan that we're here to discuss. Our team will be describing the plan in the coming slides, and we are really looking forward to sharing it with you. We feel this plan contains all the elements needed for successfully delivering the city's mission, its vision, goals, and its values. Next slide. At our workshop here tonight, we are pleased to have several members of the Tripepi Smith team here to discuss the communication and engagement plan that we've developed for Pinole. As we move forward with our presentation, you'll be hearing from Senior Business Analyst Karen Villasenor, Junior Business Analyst Kaylin Thompson, as well as Junior Business Analyst Jacob Lyle, all of whom were hands-on in the research and development of this communication engagement plan. Next slide. So as we really jump into the meat of this presentation, just some friendly reminders. We are recording the discussion tonight, so we can share it for those who could not be with us here this evening. The recording will be posted to the Communications and Engagement Plan webpage, which is the URL that we'll be sharing with you. Also, you can probably tell only panel members will be on camera, and we'll have audio today except for our Q&A session, which I'll be describing here in a moment. We do have 1 hour here today for our discussion, and we'll be running through brief introductions, a short explanation of the plan, focusing on the city's plan to improve communication and engagement with the community. Then we'll move on to focus on the community Q&A. And when we get to the Q&A portion of this evening, we'll ask participants to go ahead and raise your hand via the button on Zoom. So that is in the reactions section of your Zoom screen. You can just click raise hand. When you do that, we'll go ahead and call your name and through Zoom ask you to unmute. And then you can unmute once we've called upon you. And we'll be working on answering as many community questions tonight as we can. We do have a hard stop at 8 p.m. So any questions that we don't get to you, we invite you to reach out to us, reach out to the city, visit that webpage, and we'll plan to follow up with you on answering any questions. But we do plan to have a large focus tonight on that Q&A and get to as many questions as we possibly can. Again, you can visit the webpage following this event for additional information and to view the recording. So we'll be sharing that URL with you as a final reminder when we get to that point. And with that, I think we are ready to dive into the overview of the plan. So I'll turn it over to Karen.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the City of Pinole's Communication Engagement Plan. The plan is currently in draft form, and of course, we're holding this workshop tonight to provide you with an overview and outline what's included in the plan and get your input and your feedback. To start, the city engaged our team to develop the plan in order to provide a framework that will help strengthen the city's communication efforts and help City Hall more effectively reach and engage residents throughout the city. So throughout the plan, you'll notice that the recommendations we've included are outlined in 2 different phases, with the first phase being the priority phase that should be implemented as soon as possible to lay down that framework, and then the second or longer term phase included for more long-range goals. Next slide, please. And just a few different priorities here and focuses that we had while developing the plan and following some interviews that we had in terms in order to create the plan. A few of the different goals here and what public engagement means for the city is improving access to timely and helpful information to Pinole residents about the city's programs and services, and also providing easy ways to communicate with Pinole and engage. Additionally, the city is looking to promote transparency in decision-making and the outcomes of key citywide issues.
Okay, so before we dig into our findings and recommendations, it's really important to understand where we're starting from. So this is our Pinole by the numbers. And in it, we look to understand all the different tools and methods the city is using to communicate with residents. And there's even more than on this chart. So we have social media, the website next door, and there's also all sorts of other kinds to consider, such as printed collateral like flyers and banners, and even in-person events that the city holds. So to define what our goals are, we need to understand where we're beginning from. As we can see, the city's population is about 19,000, with about just as many residents on Facebook. This higher number on Facebook is because of the way Facebook estimates numbers. It's approximate. So there are not more Facebook users than people in Pinole. We can see the number of cities registered voters. And from there, we get into the real comparisons about the city's communications. So this first one here, we see the Pinole PD's Facebook followers at about 9,400. Below that, we see the next door members and then the next door households. So this is 4,330 households with 6,609 individuals within those households. Beyond that, we see the PD's Instagram followers at about 2,600, and then their Twitter followers at about 1,200. After that, we see where the main city accounts are. So the city's Facebook sitting at about 700 followers, their Twitter account at about 500 followers, and they have about 19 YouTube subscribers. From this, we understand that there is a big audience the city could be reaching based on where Pinole PD is reaching, and a lot of room for the city to grow in those areas.
Thank you, Jacob. And I'm going to dive into the first recommendations included in our strategic plan for the city. So starting with planning, we want to help the city shift from a reactive to more of a proactive communication style. This, for the most part, involves getting the city to work from reacting to things that are happening day to day to planning ahead, and with limited staffing resources dedicated to communications, that historically has not been possible for the city. But in terms of planning, the city does have an opportunity to establish a cross-departmental planning process where departments across City Hall are able to proactively think about the different upcoming programs, services, and projects that are going to need to be communicated about. This is oftentimes not the primary thought process in terms of communications. We have a lot of city departments who are obviously focused on their day-to-day work as they should be, and oftentimes when you don't have a communications resource to establish that framework of communicating for your project, it becomes a little bit difficult. By establishing a cross-departmental communications planning process, the city will be able to more effectively reach residents by planning ahead a little bit further in terms of what's coming up in the future.
Thank you, Karen. And then we can move into the website. So the city's website is often the highest profile and most utilized communication platform by residents, visitors, and stakeholders. So it is very important for Pinole to have a website that's useful to the public and easily navigable and highlights the character of the city. So that's something we want the city to focus on, is a user-friendly, easily navigable design. So we did recommend some restructuring for the format of the city's website to make it easier to navigate it, and ensuring that information on the website is up to date for everyone. Making sure there are updates to language accessibility, and just having quick links to pages that are highly trafficked, and making sure we track website metrics through Google Analytics, so that we can add those quick links and see what citizens are looking at, residents are looking at, to make sure that those pages are easily accessible. So those are pretty much our recommendations for the website. Next slide.
All right. So as we spoke about earlier, the city has a lot of room to grow in social media. Social media is one of the most important aspects for local governments, as we see more than 80% of the American public, and probably more of Pinole's population, is on Facebook. And this is a primary news source for many people. So it's important that the city of Pinole is out there spreading accurate and helpful information. Pinole has an opportunity to broaden community engagement by expanding its presence on multiple digital platforms. The city currently operates a Facebook account, a main Instagram account, and it has an inactive Twitter account. As we move forward, our recommendations are that the city leverage the broad platform that PD already has to increase the following of the city accounts, to increase their reach and increase engagement on both of those accounts. The city also should invest in consistent and compelling social media content to get followers and to spread information in the community that residents need to know. In terms of our phase 1 action steps, we're recommending the city establish a written social media strategy so that city staff have a resource to rely on when creating social media content, and to activate the city's inactive Twitter account. And next slide.
Then moving into city branding. City branding is very important. It helps ensure that anyone who creates external facing content for the city can easily and appropriately apply its brand. So a style guide is key to maintaining that consistency across externally communicated content, including the website and social media. So we recommend the city does develop a brand style guide to make sure that branding is consistent across the board. And this consists of making sure you have an official logo and seal. And we do know that Pinole does use their seal as the logo, but sometimes logo and seal can be different. But making sure that there are specific guidelines for how that logo or seal are used. That could be sizes, colors, variations, depending on what document or social media graphic you're using. You also want to make sure that they're incorporating colors that complement the logo and seal and the official brand palette. So also creating an official brand palette, and then consistently using the logo and seal and those colors together to create a consistent brand. Also determining the city's official fonts and providing guidelines on how to use those fonts. And for the city, at least making sure they have like a guide or sheet that outlines those key guidelines for the city's logo, colors, and fonts. And developing templates is very helpful for materials such as letterheads and business cards, press releases, staff reports, things like that, agendas, banners, flyers, and postcards that are sent out to residents. We also recommend that the city establish a plan for replicating the existing external facing plans and reports so that it matches the current brand or the future brand that they will have, and establishing more practices for any other external facing communications such as PCTV, and making sure that everyone that does use these things have the available resources. Next slide, please.
In addition to the city's other communications efforts, the city also has a cross-dimensional newsletter, the bi-monthly City Managers Report. A newsletter is a really important piece of any communication strategy because it complements all other communications efforts and can effectively reach portions of the community that maybe are not being reached by those other methods. Additionally, it is a direct form of communication for the city, whether it's emailed or it's mailed. It goes to your physical or your digital inbox, whereas social media is a more passive approach. As of now, the current bi-monthly City Managers Report covers interesting and critical information that residents need to know. And we believe with an updated look and feel, the newsletter can gain more distribution and more regular subscribers. As we move forward, we'd like to see the city develop digital advertising campaigns via the city's social media accounts to grow the audience for the bi-monthly City Manager Report. Also, just ensuring that all content is timely and relevant to residents, and ensure that we're consistent with the city's brand and voice. Moving on, in our phase 2 recommendations, we recommend the city expand use of an email marketing tool to help out with distributing to subscribers.
And moving on to policies and procedures, the city's communication and engagement plan does include a section that recommends establishing a few different policies that help manage communication efforts. A few of those include a social media policy, internal and external, a media relations policy, and a branding and style guide, which Kaylin did already reference previously. Managing communications efforts is easier and more efficient when an organization has established policies to guide them. Policies also provide potential legal protections. So updating key policies would benefit the city's communication efforts, as well as establishing a few other key ones.
And then we can move into crisis management. So crisis management is important. Crises tend to come up unexpectedly. So a key part of crisis management is preparation. So it's good for the city to have a clear process for handling these crises, because that can lessen confusion and provide clear next steps for residents and staff. So we do recommend that the city does develop a crisis communications plan, so the city and its staff can use it as a guideline for communications. We recommend that they determine a single point of contact, a spokesperson or a spokesperson for crisis communications, and define a target audience, define target audiences for certain crises within the city. And then with that, identifying existing internal and external sources of communication. Currently, the city does not have an emergency notification tool. And so while the city can use features of existing tools like Facebook local alerts, a next step would be to establish something like a Nixle account. Nixle is a trusted emergency alert tool among local government agencies. So that is an option for the city, but it's definitely easier to reach residents using something like that. We also recommend they create communication assets, templates for press releases and those notifications and any other communications that might be necessary for a certain crisis. And also having emergency evacuation graphics, so it's easy for residents to interpret and see. And then also making sure that they outline how to measure and determine the success of those communications so that they know how to move forward with the next communications that they may have to do. And we recommend developing a communication decision tree and checklist for staff to use as a guideline for communications, and that will determine who's going to be talking about what and what press releases are needed, or if certain types of communications are necessary. And then going into phase 2, we recommend the city does regularly update this crisis communications plan to ensure it contains the most current information and practices. And then moving forward, review that crisis communications plan annually to determine direction on communication strategy and update with the current specific campaigns and adjust the document accordingly. Next slide.
Pinole, like many other smaller cities, is suffering from a decline in local journalism over the last few years due to changes within the media. Despite this trend, the city does have opportunities to connect with journalists. So we recommend that the city continues to build relationships in the press by assigning a resource to monitor local media mentions when the city is brought up, and also defining a process for when the city wants to reach out to the media with a story. Designating a staff resource and regularly writing press releases and sending them out to a maintained media list will help the city identify key individuals in the media and help them cultivate relationships, which will help paint the city in a positive light.
Then moving into language access, Pinole does have a diverse community, and as local populations continue to become more diverse, it's essential for local governments such as Pinole to take steps to ensure that diverse communities can access and engage with them or with the government that represents them. So expanding language access and providing translated documents and messaging in the languages spoken by the city's residents and stakeholders will ensure that the city's information will be effectively communicated. So in phase 1 of our recommendations, we recommended developing a defined process for translation services of communications, and also updating the website translation options to include more options, specifically simplified Chinese. And then moving into our second phase, we recommend that for some posts, you can boost bilingual posts to increase reach for certain ones, and then also plan to collect and analyze metrics to evaluate the performance of those translated communications. So next slide, please.
All right, and cities across the nation use residence academies to educate community members about the inner workings and processes of local government. These are used throughout cities really to gather a group of people who are going to be essentially shadowing or going to workshops, learning all about the city's inner workings for maybe like a few weeks, depending on how the academy is set up. But it comes across as a series of workshops where residents can attend and learn more about the city. So with Pinole wanting to increase resident engagement among all residents, adults and students alike, a residence academy would be a good next step in terms of engaging those residents and helping them understand how the city of Pinole works and what the departments do and how services and programs are implemented for the community. Additionally, the development of a residence academy would help strengthen the city's bonds with the community and empower residents to more effectively and actively engage with their local government.
And then lastly, we're going to talk about metrics. So regularly analyzing metrics to gather insights and improve communication efforts is a great tactic to use. So that is something that we do recommend that the city can implement. So implementing like a data-driven approach in gathering important insights to help improve the communication efforts is a great way to go. A data-driven approach will help guide important decisions related to communications efforts, including resource allocation, and ensures the city knows what efforts are the most efficient and effective for reaching its constituents. So in our action steps, we did recommend the city plan to collect, analyze, and report on available metrics on a quarterly basis. To regularly compare the metrics on the baseline averages. Determine key metrics to report regularly. There are many insightful metrics that a city can report on, whether that be website metrics or social media metrics. But for example, if you're analyzing post reach and post engagement, the city can determine the impact of information. The post reach and post engagement can also correlate to in-person attendance at meetings and events. So those are helpful things to know and leverage. And leveraging insights from each quarterly report can inform messaging strategy and distribution. We also recommend they optimize Google Analytics to ensure quality data is retrieved. And then in phase 2, we recommend they shift from quarterly to monthly reports to stay informed on shifts in the communications or the city's communications efforts more regularly, and incorporating metrics discussions into cross-departmental communications planning meetings to ensure that all departments stay informed on communications efforts, results, and understand which efforts are working and which need to be fine-tuned, as well as conducting annual surveys and reviews to make sure that they are up to date on any metrics. Next slide.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kaylin, and thank you, team. We will have about 30 minutes for Q&A, so that is perfect this evening. I do want to mention the URL where people can find the full plan. So in case you haven't gotten that before, it is ci.pinole.ca.us/communication and engagement. And I want to bring that up now. We'll hit it again before we close, but if, as we're discussing, you want to reference anything in the full plan, you can find that full plan on the webpage. And I just double checked, it is 144 pages, including all the appendices. So a ton of work and research went into that, and it is all on the webpage for your full reference. But we did have that high-level overview. So thank you, team, for sharing that with everyone here this evening. As we mentioned, our goal this evening is to really give the community a chance to offer feedback and to hear from you. So with that, I believe we can go ahead and transition to the Q&A. As we do that, is there anything that the Tripepi Smith team wanted to revisit or emphasize before we transition to Q&A? Not seeing anything. All right. So let's go ahead and see if folks on the meeting have questions. If you can raise your hand. And I believe we also have the chat open to where participants can send a chat to the host of the meeting. So if you prefer to type your question, you can do it that way as well. While we're letting people brainstorm their questions, I can go ahead and bring up some questions that we've heard in other situations or that are common when we develop these types of plans. So this question is for Karen. What is the importance of communication to the city's main functions?
Thanks, Jen. So it is one of the most important parts of the city's function as the city works to serve its constituents and its residents, allowing residents to be involved in the different processes, allowing them to understand what the city is working on, what is coming up. It really helps residents understand what they can expect from their local government. So whether that be a community workshop where they can understand of upcoming plans like this one today, or if it's something about an event or an upcoming city council meeting where there's going to be a particular topic discussed, it is important for cities to communicate with their residents and engage them in the process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. And I do see a hand up from Raphael, I believe. If you're able to unmute, you're welcome to go ahead and ask your question.
All right, did unmuting work now?
There you are.
Great, so I have a few questions. First off, I noticed that there was a mention on, let's see. Page 50, I think it was, of a 2020 preliminary communication plan. But searching for that on the city search function, I can't find it. Is there a direct link to that somewhere so we can compare it to this plan? And then second question is on page 82, the, I guess, preliminary crisis communications decision tree. It looks like there's a missing line after question 3. Does the city have all available information about the crisis? It just has no as an option rather than yes. Is there supposed to be a line, yes, going down to move forward with the holding statement, etc.? Or should the line be going somewhere else? And then on page 112, when I guess Civic Plus was talking about their citizen engagement modules, one thing that they mentioned was public discussion forums. I think that might be interesting for the city to consider. I know there's already things like Nextdoor and Facebook to provide third-party functions, but I think it might be worthwhile to have more extended text-based discussions on the city's website itself. I'm not sure to what extent that's practical for the city to do, though. I just figured I'd ask about that since it is listed as a potential option by one of the vendors. So those are my questions to start with.
Yeah, thank you so much. We can probably break those out one by one. So first, to reference the plan that you mentioned and asking if there was a link, I believe it was on page 50. For that one, I believe these are documents that we gathered that had already been developed. So our team, I'm thinking, will probably need to follow up with the city and or the other third party that put this together to see if we can find a link to that source document. Karen, is that your understanding as well as that one on that one?
Sorry, Jen, let me jump in on that one. It should be one of the appendices, and I can pull it up right now, but I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Okay, I'll see if I can grab that while we're chatting. And then the second question was about the communication matrix that our team had put together at one point, and it sounded like there may just be a missing line with an arrow when there are two options for no versus yes. So we can go ahead and double check that matrix and see if we need to add an arrow. That sounds like it might be missing.
Jen, I can jump in there actually with the arrow. I'm looking at it right now, and there is a missing arrow going from question number 3, and I believe it should go down to the move forward with the holding statement and social media posts and talking points, and then it would go down to the next. So that answers that question.
Awesome. Yeah, that's when we get such good feedback. So thanks, Raphael. And then I am looking for the correct the appendix here to the plan you're mentioning. And if we don't find it while we're talking through this question, we will bring it back up. But again, while we're looking for that appendix, we can go ahead and address the third question. And that was, I believe, another Karen question. Is that one that you're able to chime in on, Karen? And I can have Raphael repeat it if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yeah, would you mind repeating that third part of your question, Raphael? And I'm sorry, we'll probably have to unmute you one more time.
So my third question was basically, to what extent would it be feasible for the city to implement public discussion forums on the city's website itself, given us that's a suggested offering by one of the vendors? I think that's on page 112 to be exact.
Yeah, I know Kaylin put together the website recommendations on our end. So Kaylin, would you like to take a stab at that one?
Of course. So adding in a public forum like that would definitely be feasible. We just have to look into how Civic Live would be able to do that from the back end. But that definitely is something that's doable. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaylin. And before I move on, any other input from our team on which appendix has that plan that was mentioned in the first question?
I'm not sure if it's the 2021, but I know the Sorrell report does start on page 43 or 40, 43, appendix B. I know that that was, I believe, in 2022 though, so I'm not sure. I think he mentioned a 2020 plan. So
Yes, so that might be something where we need to follow up because it's something that's mentioned in the appendix. So the mention is on page 50 to a plan from 2020. So we'll just do a little bit more research there and see if we can link to that source document.
And actually, Jen, I think I found it. It's the
Ooh, fabulous.
the strat plan that's supposed to, or the strategic plan from 2020 to 2025. That does start. That's the actually Appendix A,
Oh,
26.
wonderful. All right. Well, we have answered all three pieces of that first question. So thank you, Raphael, for the insightful questions. And I'm seeing a few additional hands up. So Maureen, I see yours next. We can ask you to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I have two questions. The first one is, do you have examples of what a residence academy looks like? How often are they videotaped? Are they, is it ongoing, or is it the same participants that show up, for a 6-week period? And then the second question is, I'm very familiar with community warning system, and I have received Nixle reports for certain areas, but not Pinole. And I'm just curious if Pinole has to have their own Nixle account and have people register for just Pinole, or is it shared across the entire Nixle platform? So that if I'm getting emergency information from, say, Martinez, and I register and I register as a Pinole resident, but my workplace is in Martinez, I get Martinez stuff. But just wondering if we have to cultivate a whole new list in which we're already encouraging people to register for the community warning system. How do we, avoid having people get mixed up and register for both? So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Those are great questions. So the first one on the Residence Academy, you had asked for examples of participation and whether they're recorded. So for that piece, Karen on our end put together the Residence Academy information. So Karen, I'll turn that over to you to take a first stab.
Thank you, Jen. So I would say that, yes, we have examples of how that could look. I will say that it can be very customized to the city and their needs. So every city does it a little bit differently. Of course, now with online and virtual being a lot more popular, we can definitely do this online and record it and have it available for people to view after.
Thank you, Karen. And then for our second question, that was about Nixle and how that would work, particularly if people live in one city and work in another. And for that section, I know our crisis recommendations were gathered by Kaylin. So is this one that you're able to chime in on, Kaylin?
Yes, so Nixle is it's an opt-in service, so you would have to opt in, and there are ways the city can let you know that they have enrolled in Nixle and made their own Nixle account, so that you would be made aware of the sign up option. So it would really just be the city making sure that you guys know that you can opt into that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and we've got some more hands up, so I love the engagement. Christy, I see that hand up next, so we'll ask you to unmute.
Sorry, did Christy? Oh, here you are. I was looking for your raised hand.
Oh, sorry. I know I put it down. Sorry.
It's all right.
I apologize. I do not know if I missed it. I was just trying to get dinner on the table for my little human and then hopped over here. what is the anticipated timeline and the next steps after this workshop? Is there going to be another workshop and what have you, is the first question. And I was trying to read all 144 awesome pages. And correct me, so the point of contact would be the assistant city manager, is that correct? For the communication go-to. And right now, Pinole doesn't have one?
That
Okay. Okay. And I guess my quandary is just from my experience, the most effective communication is when there is a direct go-to person to where that is just their focus. Is it because it's the personnel problem? We don't have the bodies or the monies to be able to dedicate someone to have that. I see heads nods. I'm like, okay. Then my last question is other forms of engagement. Just if anything, have we looked into community service commissioners of just making that a little bit more robust, since it should, I guess, in my view, be where the people go to ask questions and be that liaison between the city and the people? And has anyone looked into doing outreach to the schools? Most schools have a site community outreach worker that is the liaison between the school, the district, and the community, of just someone to just kind of circle back to on a regular basis to get the message out to meet the people where they are. And has there been anything or any research or what have you regarding the digital divide? So just, I've noticed a lot of these things is social media. So just if people weren't savvy online, doing Zoom and what have you, how are we going to reach them so then we can make sure that we're meeting where they are, so then the information is out and it's more of an equitable situation? Thanks.
All right, thank you, Christy. A lot of great questions there. So we've got some notes on our end that I think we jotted down all your questions. We'll go through them one by one and make sure we address each of them. So the first one, what are the next steps and timeline after this workshop? For that one, on the general planning process, I'll turn that over to Karen on our team.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of that question?
Yes, so just a general question. People are joining the workshop this evening. We're gathering feedback. Can you describe the next steps from here?
Yeah, so I did hear you ask if there was going to be another workshop. This is the only workshop planned for this for now. We are going to take some of the feedback that we are hearing today and see how it aligns or disaligns with the plan, and just making sure that the finalized plan is reflective of our workshop today.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And then I would just add, obviously, our hope with every city is that they would move forward once the plan is finalized in implementing it, and then keeping the community informed and engaged as to how the recommendations are unfolding. So the webpage is up, it exists as a resource for the city and the community, and hopefully that information and communication continues to flow. And then as far as the city contact for communications, I think that was pretty much answered, but just to reiterate, anything that you want to chime in on.
Sorry, if I can jump in on that one. Lily Whalen, who's on this call right now, she's the community development director, and she did just let us know via chat that she is that the assistant city manager is actually starting next week.
Awesome update. Thank you. And thank you, Lily. All right. And then we got a question on whether the city has looked into, in our team actually, if there has been investigation into community services commissions. And I think there's a little bit of information in the report on commissions. Would Karen on our team also like to chime in there?
Yeah, I can chime in. I will say that the part of our plan that addresses the commissions hasn't necessarily been forming new ones, but more so using existing committees and commissions to be the voice for the city and reach out to residents, their contacts whenever there's new information available for committees and for constituents within the city.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. And then as far as the discussion on outreach to schools, I believe that would also kind of fall in the lane of the Academy and Commission. So is there anything that we wanted to touch on there, Karen?
I'm sorry, which one was that one, Jen?
In terms of outreach to schools and whether or not that's anything currently in our plan, or if it's something that we want to take back and revisit with the city following this workshop?
Yeah, so on that one, I would say that's something that we want to take back and revisit. It's currently not specifically outlined, but we do agree that having contact with your school districts, that's always a good way to reach students, reach residents specifically, because students and their families.
Awesome. And then there's just one last piece of the questions that we received from our stakeholder there. And the question is on what research we did on the digital divide and reaching residents that aren't as tech savvy. So I think this weaves across many sections of the plan. I'm sure in crisis management and media relations, there are some pieces of things that aren't fully digital. So I will open that up to our Tripepi Smith team, who feels like they would like to chime in first on reaching folks in ways other than digital.
Yeah, I can hop in.
Go for it.
Sorry, go ahead, Karen. Okay. Yes, it's absolutely something that came up. We know that the elderly population in Pinole is very large, especially relative to a lot of other cities in the area. So as we're building out social media, which we do think is an important tool, we also think it's important to retain physical elements of the communications plan, which includes printed flyers and banners along the roadway. It also may include postcards and maybe a regular newsletter, which has the potential to go out in email, which we hope is more accessible than social media, or as a mailer.
And that was on point with what I was going to chime in on, Jacob, specifically the mailers. That's something that we have seen be fairly effective across communities in terms of reaching those who may not be on social media or otherwise using the internet or email to communicate and learn about their communities.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Karen. And I would just also add, because I know that the media relations piece was a big part of the plan, there's also a large benefit there of having strong media engagement where you can reach folks in print media, whether they read their daily newspaper every morning or via the radio, if people are listening to the radio, even in different languages on their way to work. And so media engagement is also a nice piece there. All right, and then we actually have gotten a question via the chat, which I want to make sure we don't miss. So we got a question about using the proper logo. It's by using the proper logo and seal. Is that how the city is planning to have more guards on the street for everyone's safety? What happens to phone calls and emails? So just wanting to make sure that we touch on this here. Yeah, so in terms of the branding piece, we do have a point of contact here to touch on that. Kaylin, I guess, would you be willing to just reemphasize what the purpose of the branding aspect is?
Yeah, the purpose of branding is really just to create a consistent look to city communications, so that when you see the city communications, so whether it's social media, the website, or a newsletter, it's coming from the city itself. And branding is great for brand awareness and making sure that residents are aware that the city is aware of city communications and what they are. Hopefully that answers that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Kaylin. All right, and we'll go back to questions being asked by folks on the line. So I see Irma's hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Thank you very much. I just have to make a comment that I have lived in Pinole over 40 years, and I haven't seen a better report that you have put out for the city. It's very long overdue. I don't know where you guys been, but just to make it funny. But reality is city is hurting communication wise. You said it, and it's true. A lot of the recommendations to me could probably, I have a lot of questions and comments and good ones to add. And I hope that I can submit them to you in the next day or so and also to put the city and especially because we're hiring new people. We have city staff and city manager less than 2 years in the city. I guess you've noticed that. Our consul is less than 4 years, and we're having an election this year. And it's very, very important to me that this report go out to each council member and the ones that are running, especially because this is where we have to be for our people, our residents, information, records. We have 2 TV stations, lack of information. There is no reason why anybody should be home not knowing what's going on. And I've been hearing this across every block that I've walked at because I'm campaigning for a few people. And I can't tell you, people don't know where to go. And I think your report says it all. And I hope we adopt everything you say with a little bit of tweaking here and there for our small city, because you did do this report about a year ago and then with limited resources. Everybody's coming on board. I think it's time to do it. And I just want to say that I hope that we can all add comments and questions and add them to the report so that other residents can see other people have asked the same questions. And yes, we've had a lot of problems with our communication, but I think there's always a beginning, a new start. And I just want to touch on the report. I think you guys did a great job, and I hope that the council sees it and reads it and digests it and brings it out to the community, because I think you guys did an outstanding job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irma. Thank you for that feedback. And I think I heard a little bit of a question in there too, which was to ask if there's an opportunity to submit written feedback and whether that written feedback might be something that can be posted to the webpage. So we can look into that as well and post an update to that webpage if possible.
Right, and can I add something to that?
Yeah.
If we could submit the questions and comments and add them to the report, because sometimes your questions get to the website and get lost in the shuffle. Seeing that our website needs a little bit of updating, as we all said, everybody and everything needs updating in our city. So maybe if we could add it to the report, so when someone reads the report and we touch on things, I think it'd be important that tweaking this information with adding comments from the community would be excellent. And again, I really thank you, and I hope you don't leave us stranded with this report. I hope you come back and maybe touch on it in a couple, 6 months to a year, and maybe we could bring you back and see how are we doing, evaluate us, because that's who you are, and you do bring a lot of value to the city with this report, and I hope it really gets adopted. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We'll look into those recommendations. Appreciate it. All right. I am going to look at a couple more of our written questions here. So we do have another question via the chat. I'm wondering if there's a specific plan to increase engagement with social media in order to seriously grow followers and generate interest. In other words, if there's a plan for an online campaign. And I believe that would fall in our social media lane. So I'll turn that one over to Jacob initially for a stab.
Yeah. I think the most important part of getting the city's social media accounts going is more consistent posting. That's what we'd like to see, more consistent posting and more engaging topics. Posts should highlight the services the city's offering or events going on around the city so that it pops up in your feed. You know, the social media algorithms reward constant posting and things that people like. So that's our first recommendation there. And then our second recommendation is to utilize PD, the police department's already large following, and getting them to promote the city's accounts so that the city can gain followers and gain engagement and get all the things that the social media algorithms reward in terms of showing it to more people.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. And I was just looking around to see if we had any more raised hands. We'll give folks another couple of minutes. And if we don't have any more hands popping up, I will take the opportunity to revisit something that Irma mentioned, which is metrics and what assessment would look like moving forward. I do think that's a key part of our plan and a key part of our processes as plans like this are implemented. So for that, Kaylin, would you be able to chime in on what it would look like to use metrics moving forward and how that might assist the city in implementing the recommendations?
Yes, of course. So metrics are very, very useful when it comes to creating a strategy moving forward. So looking at certain metrics, you can determine what topics the residents and community are interested in, which ways have become most effective. And so using those metrics to determine how you're going to implement a strategy is very helpful. And same thing with the website. Using metrics to see where residents are going on the website. So you have like different quick links, maybe on the homepage, and making things more accessible for residents. Jen, I think there was another part to that question because I feel like I'm missing something, but.
I think that is just about it. So just how it would help the city in implementing the recommendations.
Perfect.
Yep. All right, and I know we're getting close to the end of our evening here, so I would encourage folks, if there are any thoughts or questions or things that we didn't get to in our conversation, you're welcome to send a chat to the host via Zoom. Send us your note, and if you'd like follow up directly and include an email address if so. I will note we did get a comment from a Community Service Commission member here today, and we'll follow up with you directly. So thank you for that feedback. Before we wrap, are there any final questions from our participants here this evening? Oh, I'm seeing another raised hand from Raphael.
Sure. I just wanted to follow up on an earlier question. It sounds like you were saying the preliminary communications plan was the strategic plan, or was it a different document?
I believe that is what is referenced on page 50, if I'm understanding the team correctly.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that was the first time I'd heard it described as, the preliminary communications plan. It might be clearer in future documents if it's written out as the city strategic plan.
Yeah, we could certainly add a footnote or something like that to better clarify that reference.
Great.
Thank you. All right, well then if our team can share the slides one more time, we'll just wrap up with some final reminders. All right, well, as we wrap up, I want to emphasize how community members can stay engaged and find additional information. So we do encourage everyone to visit the URL here on this slide, ci.pinole.ca.us/communication and engagement. Here we will be posting the recording of this workshop once we download it from Zoom and get it processed. We will double check with the city, but we'd also like to have captions added to the workshop so that folks can go ahead and see those captions on the meeting recording as well. And again, you can visit that page to find additional information, including the full plan, and go through and see if you come up with any additional questions. We'll also be working with the city to keep that page updated with any follow-up action from this workshop, as well as follow-up as the plan is hopefully implemented. So with that, we want to thank everyone again so much for joining this workshop this evening and for sharing all your feedback, for asking such great questions. And we are really excited to have this plan being finalized to include such great recommendations for the city to improve its communication and engagement with community members such as yourselves. So we hope to see you again at any future events, and we hope to hear from you as the process moves forward. So with that, thank you again and enjoy the rest of your evening.